From the rubble and devastation of 9/11 has come not just a magnificent new building, but a renewal of a community, a college, and a city.
So our 24-hour day is just a cultural tradition and nothing more. There's nothing inherently rational or scientific about it. It's just something that we've inherited.
I write about the arts. I write about things that are cultural. I write about the social texture, the fabric that interests me, about the fabric of things.
And I wasn't really thinking, and I only really discovered that what I was making my novel about was life and death, the nature of the body, the nature of life.
Welcome to Study with the Best, the magazine show about CUNY. I'm Tina Beth Pina. Right now, I'm standing near the brand new Fiterman Hall at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. Over to my right is the One World Trade Center building, known to most of us as the Freedom Tower. When it's finished next year, the Freedom Tower will be the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere and the third tallest building in the world. More than 11 years ago, the 9/11 terrorist attack changed the face of Lower Manhattan. But that destruction is turning into triumph as Fiterman Hall reopens and the Freedom Tower climbs to completion. To some passers-by, perhaps the brand new Fiterman Hall is only red brick and glass. But to people here at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, this outstanding building symbolizes hope, rebirth. For many of the students, it is just perfect.
What's striking about this building is definitely its architecture. Its design is very modern, contemporary.
Everything is perfect. If you look at the place, it's perfect.
It feels like BMCC has a real campus, one building, another building, another building, and people are getting lost, like a real school.
I'm going to take the staircase up one second. Thank you. You're welcome.
I like the spiral stairs. I like how everything's like very open, and I like the view.
We're trying to maintain a connection with the community and not have a building sitting in the middle of the World Trade Center, sitting in the middle of Ground Zero, isolated from everything. We are a part of the community, and this helps us to remain the anchor that we have become down here.
The old Fiterman Hall was integral to BMCC ever since it was donated by the Fiterman family in 1993. But on that fateful September morning, just as a major renovation was completed, the World Trade Center No. 7 collapsed on it, making it totally uninhabitable and the only college building in the country to fall to terrorism. While everybody in Fiterman Hall was evacuated safely, 6 BMCC students and 2 alumni died while working in the World Trade Towers and area. 2 were New York firemen killed in the line of duty. And yet immediately after the horrifying attack, BMCC President Antonio Perez, students, faculty, staff, and alumni fought back the only way they knew how, by offering the use of their campus on Chambers Street to the rescue and recovery effort. So it should come as no surprise that more than a decade later, the beautiful new Fiterman Hall is opened, the testament to the collective efforts of CUNY, the state, the city, the downtown community, and the Fiterman family.
We're here today to thank friends of our college who made something quite remarkable happen.
This project was done the right way, the best way, and the final product is a shining example of Lower Manhattan's extraordinary rebirth.
From the rubble and devastation of 9/11 has come not just a magnificent new building, but a renewal of a community, a college, and a city.
With a student body from more than 155 countries, BMCC is a vital component adding to the bustle of today's Lower Manhattan.
And now, As the BMCC student population expands to over 24,000 students, the new Fiterman Hall stands as a symbol to New York City's rebirth and its commitment to education.
So this is probably, in my perspective, a jewel that will shine forever in downtown Manhattan.
To some extent, clocks and watches have been made so that we can be stupid. We've created a device that is really a dumbed-down device behind which is a whole host of science and understanding, so that we have an easy time of knowing what time it is. I'm Kevin Birth. I'm a professor of anthropology at Queens College at the City University of New York. Most people don't understand how time reaches them. Most people think that the time on their clocks, the time on their watches, is still calibrated directly to the sun and directly to the Earth's rotation, when that's not the case at all. Time as we know it is actually an average time. The Earth's day is not stable throughout the year. It varies because of the tilt of the Earth, the elliptical orbit, and the fact that we're also orbiting around the sun rather than stationary. One of the interesting things about our ideas of time is how multicultural they are. We have the 24-hour day from the Egyptians, the 60 minutes and 60 seconds from the Babylonians. We have the dial that is an inheritance from the sundial. So it's really a multicultural inheritance. And I'm interested in the obelisk because obelisks are markers of time, particularly markers of noon. Throughout the ancient world, obelisks would be used to indicate noon and something called the analemma, which is the movement of the sun in the sky throughout the year. So this is actually an ancient timepiece, and the neat thing about the Egyptians is they're the culture from which we got our 24-hour day. They were the first ones who decided to divide day into 12 hours and night into 12 hours, and that's why we have 24 hours. There's no reason for it. So our 24-hour day is just a cultural tradition and nothing more. There's nothing inherently rational or scientific about it. This, when the shadow is at its shortest, which is also when it's pointing directly south, will indicate solar noon. Now, solar noon here won't be noon on your watch. The reason for that is daylight saving time, so your watch is automatically an hour off. Our watches are set to the meridian that defines time for our time zone as opposed to the longitude we're actually at. And then there's the equation of time, which is the difference between the solar day and mean time throughout the year. When we think about time as we experience it, it's nice to recognize that this isn't just a European invention. This isn't just an invention of the scientific revolution. It's a collective effort of a lot of cultures over a lot of time. Right now we're in Union Square, and what's behind me is a piece of artwork that is called Metronome. What it includes is a clock. Most people don't realize that those red digits that are scrolling away on the side of the building are actually a hyper-accurate clock. What you see in the middle, which is scrolling really fast, is hundredths of seconds. Everything to the right of it is clock time, but most people don't recognize it as clock time because it's representing time in military time. What's on the left is the amount of time that's left in the day. When all this is put together, it's, for most people, a confusing representation of time because we're so much accustomed to our digital clocks or to our clock dials, when really representing time is just a cultural choice. What's interesting about this, in contrast to the obelisk, is the obelisk will forever indicate time in relationship to the shadow cast by the sun. This still represents the inheritance from the ancient Egyptians. It's still the 24-hour day. It's still that multicultural time that we've all become accustomed to. This book basically looks at how things think for us, that when we tell time, we're actually using very little brain power to tell time. Instead, all the brain power has been programmed into the watches and clocks and calendars that we use. The fact that we're on this rotating globe has profound consequences. Biological consequences. We are diurnal mammals. We are animals that live with daylight. We live in a society which is increasingly disconnected from the cycles of light, and it's increasingly having negative consequences on decision making. If you think about major accidents like Chernobyl, the Exxon Valdez, the Union Carbide disaster in India, they all have in common occurring early in the morning when we're at our worst in decision making. The consequence of our blindly giving credence to clocks and watches and calendars without really thinking of the consequences for our health, that's something that worries me a great deal.
More on the way, but first, a message from the Chancellor.
Hi, I'm Matthew Goldstein, presenting CUNY's 2012 Science All-Star Team, each winning a $126,000 National Science Foundation Award.
From Borough College, Belen Siguera Carrillo. From City College, Deborah Ayene, Teresa Carranza Fulmer, Charlie Corridor, Jamila Kester, Christy Sakdeo, and Zvi Fishman. From the CUNY Graduate Center, Andrew Fulmer. From Hunter College, Carolina Salguero, Jimena Santillan. From the Macaulay Honors College at City College, Jae-Song Han, Christopher Hugh, and Stephen Ma. And the Macaulay Honors College at Hunter College, Vivian Baldessari and Vincent Way. And from York College, Kirk Haltofterhide.
CUNY's Science All-Stars, like our Yankees, hometown champions.
"14 years ago, I made a choice to actually leave my own country and move to the United States. And for 14 years, I've seen this place changing, and I fell in love with it again and again and again. And I always wanted to participate more in the life of this town and this country. That's why I decided that I would like to become a US citizen. Last year, I became one, and now I'm going to be voting for the first time in my life in the American presidential elections. And I found this really amazing, really exciting, because most of the time, we make choices every day, and we don't consider them really big choices, because it's all about what we're going to wear, what we're going to eat, how we're going to go about the rest of the day, stuff like that. But actually electing where your country should go for the next 4 years is an amazing opportunity. So when I was growing up, living behind the Iron Curtain, I always wanted to see how democracy works. And I think democracy works when you exercise your right to vote, because you are selecting the path you see your country going for the next 4 years. It might be the wrong path, it might be the right path, but at least you're making a conscious choice to participate. That's why I'm voting. And you should too.
I've been looking at the whole topic of artist studios, artist spaces, legal, illegal, the whole business of gentrification. Do artists network in spaces? Does networking change the nature of art? Does it become a social space? Does it become a political space? Does it change the nature of their art? I'm Roslyn Bernstein. I'm professor of journalism at Borough College and the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. What has happened to the artistic dimension, the presence, of Soho? Okay. The first thing that happened is, because the ground floor changed so much, because galleries aren't there, you could actually say, if you didn't know, no art in Soho. But in fact, on the upper floors in buildings, some commercial, some residential, there are still many artists living in Soho. The galleries are smaller ones. The artists are living here for the following reason. If you live in a place that is rent controlled and where you have 2,000 square feet and where you're paying anywhere, let's say $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month or $1,500 a month, where would you move to? Behind you is the former, emphasis on the word former, Soho Flea Market, much beloved by tourists and locals. And one day in the spring, lo and behold, we all woke up and This chain link fence was here. It just sold for $30 million. The notion of pushing out or changing the chemistry, the landscape, the dynamic always interests me. I write about the arts. I write about things that are cultural. I write about the social texture, the fabric. That interests me, about the fabric of things and the artistic fabric. And the loss of the flea market, as far as I'm concerned, for yet another retail building is another wound, a blow for Soho. I decided that the way to tell the story of Soho was through the biography of a single building. We roll chronologically through the evolution of Soho using the prism of 80 Worcester Street. I would say I thought it would take 2 or 3 years. It took 6. One thing led to another. One detail produced another. It involved traveling many places, but it also involved so much interviewing, such extensive background research on zoning changes, on deeds, on things that were sold, on letters of the Soho Artists Association, on letters of the Soho newsletter, on building documents. I would say it was investigative journalism in the context of sort of an arts investigative. I like the arc of history in what I do. I'm always interested in the historical context of something, the social, the political context. I use that in my teaching. It's very important to me that when students write journalistic pieces that they ground those pieces, even if they're contemporary pieces, in a sense of the context, the historical context. Look what's happened to New York, to the gentrification. Look at Williamsburg. Look at all the neighborhoods. Where do you go? The artists who still live here, 1, economically can afford it. 2, they are grandfathered. They can still live here. There's a whole transition here. If it's no longer an artist district, should the zoning reflect what it is now? I side with not forcing any artists out, renters or owners. I side with preserving their rights. Okay, that being said, I do believe that the zoning probably can be modified so that we can accommodate certain legalization. There can be modified zoning that will enable those people who want to sell their lofts to be able to do so. That's my position.
When they invented the internal combustion engine, they never imagined such a horrid injury. It didn't occur to anyone that we would not only change the temperature of the air, but turn the oceans black as death. People not often in talking about a book will ask you, what's the book about? Well, the truth of the matter is there's never a simple answer. It's the hardest, it's the most impossible question, because really the book is the book. One could talk about starting points, for instance, and there are many of them, but one of the starting points for me, which I think the reader isn't normally going to be terribly aware of, certainly not for a long time anyway, is I began to think of the internal combustion engine. And what an amazing thing. And of course, we didn't think that when we're making the internal combustion engine, we're also sort of planning at least to severely damage the planet, if not destroy it. I didn't want to write about someone making an internal combustion engine, but I did want to think about the bright invention. And I wasn't really thinking, and I only really discovered that what I was making my novel about was life and death, the nature of the body, the nature of life. When I began to write, the thought of having a career as a writer in Australia in 1964 was just laughable. And yet I persisted. So I guess I was sort of doing it for some limited level of glory. For me as the writer, I want to make something exceptionally beautiful that never existed on the earth before. And that's sort of enough to get me out of bed in the mornings every day. When I teach at Hunter in the MFA program, what I talk about endlessly is what happens first and what happens second, the release of information. Which order do you put it in? And It's very, very hard to learn to do it, but it is amazing what a miraculous difference you can make by just deciding to release things in a different way. I thought that the great thing about Hunter College is it costs a whole lot less than most places. And I didn't see why, it being New York, we couldn't have the best program in the entire country. I really wanted to do that, but you've got to do that, you've got to have terrific faculty, which we have assembled. Brilliantly chosen, I must say. I've taught in lots of places, and I always, I did a good job and I gave everything I could to those jobs, but there's never anything been like what we have here. And because the quality of those students and their different backgrounds and their different life experiences, their different stories, their will and their pleasure in literature just makes it, I could get sort of just drunk on talking about it. It's wonderful. At the annex, at this early hour, I delete you, my darling, my beloved, with your wide, soft mouth against my neck. I would rather scrub your bones and place them in the open air, scrub your sternum, labour at your spine. The retailers of books and literature have sort of taken over the engine room. That's not, to me, a very, very good way to produce a national or a world literature. And the wonderful thing about literature as an art is it's really cheap to make. The sort of will, the desire to tell a story, to shape experience into words is really, really there. And I don't think it's going to, a desire to read and a desire to write is not going to go away. It's just a little threatened at the moment. There's always the possibility that you could write something truly great. There is nothing to beat the thrill of a great day's work and to really feel, and also at certain moments of writing, to sort of feel that you're actually doing something that's risky and sort of that's working and that's beautiful. And I just love that feeling.
Thanks for watching Study with the Best. For all things CUNY, log into our website at cuny.edu, or you can Facebook and tweet us at CUNY TV. See you next time.
This is a water clock that I've made. Now, the correct term for a water clock is a clepsydra because they were not clocks at the time that these things were originally invented. These were used primarily to measure duration, not to determine the time of day. And in fact, one can go back to writers like Pliny the Younger, other Roman orators, and learn that they timed their speeches using a device like this. Now, the basic way in which this works is you fill this container up with water, and there's a very, very small hole in the bottom, and it drains out at a relatively steady pace, and I've marked the side with pieces of tape that indicate 10-minute intervals. So for the water clock to work, all I need to do is pour the water in to the correct level, position it over my coffee pot, and in fact, all coffee makers are de facto water clocks. And this way I can time when I'm speaking. And I often use this when I give talks. I jokingly say I use a clepsydra because that's what Jesus would have done. Basically, I fill it up to more or less this line that's part of the soup container. And then when it drains down to the top of this first piece of tape, that's approximately 10 minutes of clock time.